Okay, how do we grow? Practical teaching, providential relationships, private disciplines, personal ministry, and one more, pivotal circumstances. Let me just talk about this very quickly because there's not much I can talk about, although it's the second largest stack of cards. So pivotal circumstances, these are defining moments of someone's life. And it could be good or bad. It could be going to college, getting the job, getting married, getting transferred, invited to church, having children, moving, seeing a Billy Graham crusade on TV. It could be a lot of positive things that God said, that's the moment you know God used, or the circumstance God used. But often, and more often than not, probably at least 2-to-1, these cards are bad versus good. In other words, it's divorce, cancer, getting fired, the death of a family member, the death of a friend, getting injured, getting pregnant before married, getting pregnant when you weren't ready. You see, you can rarely hear someone's faith story without hearing at least one pivotal circumstance that God used that was a game changer for their spiritual journey. And sometimes it's a great thing, but more commonly, it's a terribly difficult thing that God caused and brought into their life to help them grow in their journey. And my guess is most of you have at least one pivotal circumstance on your list. You're going to talk about it this week in your group, but other than providential relationships, it is the second most common factor that God uses, at least mentioned by our community groups and in my experience. Now, here's the 5. Practical teaching, providential relationships, private disciplines, personal ministry, pivotal circumstances. Let me say a few things. I would encourage you, just between now and when you meet as a community group, just do a little comparison. Are your 5 things from that list? And if so, which one is stronger than others? Which one is absent? We'll talk about that in a bit. But I would say this. If Philippians 2:12 and 13 is true, I think it has some implications. Verse 12 says that we are to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. We're to take our spiritual growth seriously. But we also know, verse 13, there are certain things that God uses to cause us to think differently, to live differently, to want differently. So I would suggest this, that you should make sure you are in the flow of what it is that God tends to use to change people's lives. Are you in that environment? Years ago, I read a book, and they weren't applying it to spiritual growth at all, but I read this book back in the early 90s, mid-90s, about 1995. I read a book, and it started out by talking about a surfer in California, that a surfer wants to go surfing in California. They don't grab their surfboard, go out in the ocean, and say, I got to make some waves so that I can surf. No, they go out and catch the waves that are there. Here's what I want to suggest. That these 5 things are the things that causes people to grow in their relationship with Christ. So are you utilizing the environments and the people and the situations that you could be at a place where God can do a great work in your life? You don't cause the surf waves to happen. You catch the waves that God created and use them to pursue, to develop you in your spiritual growth.